this like legislation it's there and they act it out. So all the cartels, the big banking and cartels and all those big corporations, they are the monopoly, and no one will be allowed to come along with technology. Plus also I think people, researching in their garages, you need so much money and research to get some of this off the ground. You might be able to demonstrate principles, but to apply it into a working technology is very, very difficult.
Yeah, I think. Exactly. I mean, I'd like to cover the roof in solar panels, but I'm having trouble sourcing some relatively cheap ones. I've seen plans where to try and build your own, but you obviously still have to buy a lot of the parts. So again, any of our listeners in the chat room there.
How much is a solar panel going? What's the price for a certain size?
Well, I was looking at how much people are spending on getting basically half of their roof completely kitted out.
Right.
And someone was talking about £5,500. So it's not something you could just, I mean, obviously a lot of people out there, great, they'll have this money spare, they can go and do it no problem. And then maybe within 10 years, you might pay for it in 10 years, maybe at least.
Yeah.
Even more. They're not, they're only 15% efficient. But I mean, when you would say 15% efficient, I've looked at contradicting information here as well. If you're receiving 15% of the sun's energy, then that's quite a lot of energy that you're getting. But when you say it's 15% efficient, it almost sounds like you're wasting 85%.
Yeah.
Which isn't the case. Obviously, there's the energy that you've got to spend in actually making the solar panels. Obviously, the buyer doesn't have to worry about that. But if you want to nitpick, and if you want to start playing games with the carbon counting club, then you can look at how much carbon's been spent creating the solar panels, and even something as forward thinking as kitting out the whole country with solar panels, it isn't as renewable and energy efficient as what we're led to believe. It could be a hell of a lot better.
Yeah.
The nanotechnology sheets, they've got the technology now. Obviously, they're going to slow it down and release it at a later stage, maximize profit. But you've got clear plastic sheets, which is really, really thin nanotechnology that you could put on your windows, so your windows don't even look any different. You could say go to London. You could in the square mile, you could look at Canary Wharf, for example. If you were to turn one building, all of the windows on one building, with these solar sheets, that's it. You've got all the power for your entire building, which is obviously suppressed technology. So
completely, yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous when you try and tell people about the technology that is suppressed, and you start talking to people about Tesla or about magnets, or even just anything that you'll say, oh look, this technology's been existing for decades and decades. They say, no, that can't be right, or else they'd let us have it and they'd let us buy it and make money from it. And I said, well, look how much money there is to lose, and look at the industry. And we're going to get into oil later on as well, and obviously Ian's someone who can talk about oil quite a lot. It's one of his areas. So if you like, Anthony, if you've got any questions for him as well, we can get into that as well later on. But I don't know, the way I think it's going is the energy giants, obviously they've got the monopoly at the minute, and they're slowly moving into the eco stuff, and they're going to try and control it just like they control the current situation with fossil fuels. One horrendous example is the French company EDF, who sponsor the Eden project.
Right.
You look at the Eden project. In fact, maybe I could bring it up and read some information out about the Eden project. But you've got someone like EDF, horrendous profiteering, multi-billion pound profiteering energy company, sponsoring something as positively sounding as the Eden project.
That's some good public relations.
It's ridiculous, honestly. It's so ridiculous. And when you go, I mean, let's have a look. I think I've got the website up here. If it's the same one, I'm looking at EdenProject.com. You've got, large, domes with those hexagonal. No, they're not. Is it hexagonal? Whatever it is, anyway, you've got those panels. I'm not going to count the sides. And it looks beautiful, these beautiful, allegedly eco-friendly domes, and massive on promoting the renewable energy and what we're going to do for the future and how everything's going to be great when we don't have to rely on fossil fuels. You've got a ridiculously large, multi-billion profit-making, filthy organisation like EDF sponsoring something like this. It's an absolute joke. But like I say, you'll know about this. It's all spin. It's all PR.
Yeah, that's all it is. If anyone's listening to this and they're going, what are these two idiots on about? Look up the Agenda 21, which came out of the UN, there in the early 1990s. That's like long-term UN policy for sustainability. And have a read through that and apply some independent thought while you read through, and you'll see like what this is really about. It's about just centralizing control in all forms, economic and industrial, energy control, all this sort of things. And
water, they're going hard on the food and water front, aren't they?
Completely, yeah.
The control of food is something that there's enough evidence out there. It's not even you can't even argue about that anymore. It's so obvious. There's so much information out there related to
Codex Alimentarius.
Yeah.
All these food guidelines which are coming through, which are being sneaked in on populations because the World Trade Organization, no one's voting on it, or no populations are giving consent to it, but they're taking on all these guidelines, these recommendations as standards, and then every country who's a member of the World Trade Organization automatically has to step up to it and obey these recommendations. And it's just forcing all this through in supposedly democratic systems, and it's just a big, dictated to people of how their countries must run. It's sick, really. And it's just all part of the whole carbon tax nonsense, which is about centralisation of economic control. And the only way to solve carbon change is by creating private, for-profit, multi-billion-pound international banks, which every country on the planet has to pay their carbon tax to.
Yeah, sure.
The money doesn't go back into grassroots planting trees or something. It's like...
we can have a quick talk about that after the break, about how they basically, cut these places down. Not only are they obviously destroying all the trees, but they're destroying so many forms of life. And when they replant the trees, say 15 years later, it's like walking into a plastic forest. Like literally, you've just got trees.
Yeah.
You might get the odd mushroom and a bit of grass, and you're thinking, shit, this used to be a forest, absolutely.
Woodland,
yeah. I don't know how many years it would take to replace that, but I know it's a long time. Welcome back to Northeast Truth Radio, hosted by tnsradio.com. This is Mike Cooper. Check us out on northeasttruth.com. Check out tnsradio.ning.com. You can listen to previous shows there. The network is self-funded. tnsradio.com does have a PayPal donate button. Please give anything you can. There's a lot of great shows on there every night of the week. Check that out. We're going to bring our guest in this week, our second guest, who is probably well known to all of our listeners. Ian Crane, are you there?
Yeah, hi Mike, how are you doing this evening?
Excellent. Good to talk to you again.
Hey, thanks for the invitation.
No worries.
Hello Ian.
Hi Anthony, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great.
Good.
Once again, we weren't talking during the song.
Yeah, we haven't been having a conversation off air whatsoever.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea of what we've been briefly talking about in the first half an hour, we've mentioned the situation with the control of food, We touched on that slightly. We didn't really go into it, but we've been talking about the false carbon credit con, the job situation in the northeast with Chorus. We touched on renewable energy and the agenda behind that. We mentioned Agenda 21.
Yeah.
We touched on psychological operations a little bit, which is one of Anthony's areas. We mentioned Codex, and I believe we mentioned oil as well. And obviously that's something, Ian, yourself, you know a lot about.
Sounds like I can hang up. Sounds like you covered pretty much everything over the
Bye.
All right, yeah. Well, I'll call you back tomorrow.
Okay.
Where shall we start? What do you want to get into first?
Hey, well, let's talk about the oil situation, because that's probably the most relevant. Yeah.
Brief suggestion. Some people probably, there will be some listeners out there who aren't aware of who you are, and some of the information you've been presenting around the world. Do you want to maybe give people a brief background about yourself and how you came to be where you are now?
Okay. Actually, you know what? I actually like to keep my head as far below the parapet as I possibly can.
Yeah.
I actually work on the basis that, as and when people are ready to listen or take on board the stuff that I have to talk about, they'll find me.
Absolutely.
So it's a question of sort of staying invisible to those that don't need to know what I'm doing. But, for the last 10 years, I've really been focusing full time on my research, and raising awareness of the agenda, if you like, that does not have the best interests of humanity at heart. It's an agenda that is being driven by a very small number of people. Unfortunately, there's a larger number of people who sell their souls. One that's in the press right now, of course, will be familiar to many people, Mr. A. Blair.
Absolutely.
But he's a classic example. He's not one of the inner sanctum by any stretch of the imagination. But he willingly and wittingly carries out their agenda in return for the profile and all the sort of shackles and large sums of money that go with apparent high office, when in reality, of course, he has no power whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly.
And how did I get into this research? Well, I spent 19 years in the oil industry with a company called Schlumberger.
Yeah.
Much of that was spent in the overseas arena. In fact, I was out of the UK for the whole of the 1990s. I was in the Middle East during the first Gulf War, and it was actually while I was in the Middle East that I had my very first experience at the ripe old age of 34. I had the first experience of calling into question the official version of reality, the orthodox version of reality, and that was about because I was one of the first civilians to go into Kuwait at the end of hostilities,
right,
in 1991. So this was late March 1991. And I, with some of my colleagues, we were driving around with our military escort. We were driving around the oil fields, and our job at the time was to look at the logistics of what was going to be required to deal with the firefighting. This was obviously something that had never been experienced on the planet before. We'd had oil well blowouts, but normally they occurred one at a time, not 600 plus at once. And of course, the official version of events was that the retreating Iraqi forces had set the wells alight as they were being routed by the coalition of the willing, as it was named.
Oh, God.
But the physical evidence told a different story, and basically many of the wells in the southern oil fields were surrounded by the bodies of dead Iraqi troops. And it looked very much to me as though the Iraqis had actually been defending the wells and had been overcome by superior forces.
Yep.
And I happened to make this observation, and to cut a long story short, I was effectively told to keep my mouth shut.